Greetings, greetings, greetings. Welcome to So Much to Talk About. My name is Nabaté Isles, and it's always a pleasure to feature facts and viewpoints on the world of sports as well as wonderful guests. And before I introduce this guest, who I consider a good friend and also one of the greatest writers in sports media history for sure, I want to definitely let you know to check out NSI World. That's N as in no, S as in Sam, I as in Indigo World on YouTube. That's the YouTube channel to check out past episodes and interviews of So Much to Talk About, as there's an extensive library of great people that I've interviewed and also commentary on the world of sports. So now I want to introduce this gentleman who I've known for, about 15, 16 years or so. And this man has been a major staple in sports media writing and also radio and television hosting for over 30 years. And he has written for the New York Post, has written for the New York Times, written for Yahoo, just so many, ESPN, major columnist for ESPN for many years, also host on ESPN Radio too, also host for many boxing telecasts as well. I mean, just his career is just extensive for sure. And it's my pleasure to interview this gentleman, as we also hosted a radio show, a boxing radio show that was short-lived, unfortunately.
I was wondering if you were going to mention it.
For sure, which was short-lived with our mutual friend Teddy Atlas. It's my pleasure to introduce the one and only Mr. Wallace Matthews. Sir, how are you?
It's a pleasure to see you, man. I forgot I had done all those things. Like, now I really feel old.
That means you had a very great career, because when you forget things you do, that means your career is full.
It also means you've been around a long, long time. How you doing, man? We haven't talked in a long time.
Last time I saw you was at the U.S. Open last year and everything.
Yeah, last August.
Turned out to be an entertaining tournament for sure.
I became a tennis maven like in 3 days.
I know, it's easy to catch up when you come to the U.S. Open.
I saw Aaron Hicks there, and because I was covering the Yankees also last year, and when I saw him in the clubhouse a couple of days later, it turns out like he and Osaka like hit the ball together, and they hang out and train together in California.
That's right.
Yes, I was like, "What? You a big tennis guy?" He goes, "No, I know Naomi," and he told me all this stuff. So,
yeah,
it was cool.
Yeah, he seems like a good guy for sure.
Guy.
Yeah, definitely good personality. But how have you dealt with this pandemic, as well as the the turbulent times in this country, exposing the racial injustice as well as the acknowledgement of the racial injustice? How have you dealt with this
positive to come
year in general?
It's that I think a lot more people have become aware of what goes on out there, outside their little bubble and outside their homes. I dealt with it as well as I guess anybody has. I mean, we're self-quarantining here. For a while, my kids were going crazy. I have 2 grown children, as you know, and we're all living under the same roof. None of us have strangled anyone yet.
Good.
Still getting along pretty well. But I mean, we've been riveted to the TV, for a lot of these things that have been going on. And, we also, my son went to a protest right here in Oyster Bay. They actually had a pretty big protest a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, good.
And,
good.
We've talked about it. Do we want to go? Is it worth the risk? And of course it is worth the risk, but, we just decided against it because, first of all, I'm technically in a high risk group. Because but you're in great shape, so you good, man. You all good. I'm feeling pretty confident about it, but I hate to use that as an excuse. I wish I had gotten more involved in the protests in New York, but I'm sure there's been plenty of time to do that as well.
But what you've expressed on social media, that's key. You know what I mean? That's very key.
I tell you what, I tried to keep out of it as long as I could, but after a while, you just feel like you got to do something. You got to, because if you're silent, that's assent. That means you agree with the wrong side. If you're not saying something, and the old saying, if you wonder what you would have done when the Nazis marched in, well, you're doing it now.
You dig? Right.
Yeah, and I do agree with that, and I feel like I've been, and part of it is, the social media atmosphere is just so toxic that if you put something out there that somebody doesn't agree with or offends somebody, you just get a storm of criticism and hatred and all kinds of things coming down on you and your family. And I hate to say that, I was kind of concerned about that, but now since I've been a little bit more vocal and more active, and I think people know where I stand on issues, I must say, I'm very pleased to say I've only lost about 500 followers. I was going to lose thousands. Which tells me that my followers, for the most part, are on the right side or on my side, and I think that's the right side.
Yes, sir. And also too, it's about as well. It's weeding out those people that,
without a doubt,
you don't need to have any interaction with.
If you're unfollowing me because I'm against racial injustice, you know what? You don't belong here.
I don't want That's for sure. That's for sure. Wow. Here on So Much to Talk About with the great writer and also boxing expert too, Mr. Wallace Matthews.
I like this.
For sure on So Much to Talk About. And now, Wally, I wanted to there's a lot to talk about, but you've covered baseball for many years. You covered the Yankees for many publications and everything. So you know that team well, and you know the pretty much the landscape of the game. But will we see a season, or there's no hope?
I don't think there's no hope, because I think both sides want to play part of the season. I mean, obviously the owners want it because they're paying off stadium debt. They need to put people. They need to get games on television. They need to collect some revenue. They need games.
Right.
The players want to get paid. I mean, it's in their mutual interest to play. The fact that there's a lot of saber rattling on both sides, and and a lot of posturing. Makes it difficult, and I think that my stance has been pretty clear on Twitter. I mean, I always side with the players because, as a and this is the reason why, not because I'm a fanboy, but because I'm a worker. I'm a working class guy.
Yes.
And if you're a newspaper guy and you remember the days of being in a union, you know that unless you're the owner, you're hired help. And I don't care if you're making $12 an hour or if you're making $20 million. Mike Trout is hired help.
That's right. And can be replaced. And can be replaced.
Mm-hmm. And I don't care how much they make, they are at the beck and call of ownership the same way you are and the same way I am. So I'll always side with the hired help. And when the owners are saying, well, we're taking a hit here, so we want to cut your salary back. Well, guess what? When the owners are having a windfall, do they ever say, hey, guess what? I'm going to throw you a little extra money?
Definitely not. Right.
Mike, we had a really good year this year. The attendance was through the roof, mostly because of you. We're going to sweeten your salary by throwing you an extra $1 million. Has that ever happened in the history of sports?
Rarely. Maybe less than 1%. Never.
Let me ask you another one. This is another trivia question. Has any baseball team in history, and I saw some owner, and I don't remember who it was, but I had a laugh, saying, this business is not very profitable right now. Has there ever been a Major League Baseball team sold for less than it was bought for?
Oh, never. Never, ever.
Once. Wait till I tell you who it is. It's the Yankees. It's the Yankees. Because CBS bought them back in the early 60s for like $13 million.
And when George Steinbrenner
swept them up for $8 million, and now it's worth like $4 billion. So don't tell me that the business is not profitable, okay?
Wow.
Nobody is losing money with a baseball team.
And Hank passed away.
Yeah, I love Hank. He was such a good
talk
dude.
About how.
And I know like a lot of people laughed at him and thought he was a buffoon. And he did, look, he shot his mouth off in some situations that he probably shouldn't have. But I'll tell you one thing. He was an honest guy. You could always go to him for an opinion. He would tell you what he felt. It wasn't corporate speak. And me and him had a lot of things in common. He wasn't really a boxing fan, but he's a music fan. You would have loved him for that.
Oh, really? Wow.
He was a classically trained pianist. But the reason why I liked him was because he played guitar. He was a rock guitarist. And I like aspire to be a rock guitarist. In fact, I'll show you. Back there, I have
oh, man. Wow. Okay, the Gibson.
I have a Gretsch over there,
Les
too.
Paul. Okay.
Yeah, it's a Les Paul. I have a Gretsch over there. I stink on both of them. But that was something that Hank and I had in common. We'd always talk about it, and he would give me advice on which guitars to play. He was a really good player. I mean, he played with Roger Waters.
I
he was friends with Keith Richards. Yeah, he knew a lot of these guys. There were a lot of different sides to Hank that people didn't know about, and I thought he was a really good-hearted guy. And his death hit me pretty hard. I felt like he was a friend.
Right, and he was only 62 or something like that.
He and I were virtually the same age, so yeah,
my goodness,
kind of close to home.
Yeah, God rest his soul, for sure. So, Yes, yes, indeed. And I wanted to ask you, I was very curious because, actually on Twitter, I want to give you your Twitter handle. It's Oyster Bay Bomber. So it's OYSTERBAYBOMBER, Oyster Bay Bomber. That's your Twitter handle for the listeners and for the
dropping bombs.
audience. That's right. Exactly. That's right. Oh, well, but I wanted to ask you about sports media. You've been through it from like the 80s on to now. You've seen the major metamorphosis. What is your take on it? What are the pros and what are the cons of the changes that have gone on in sports media?
Well, I think the obvious pros are that there's just so much information out there, and things that you used to have to wait until tomorrow morning to find out about, you'll find out immediately, right? I mean, pre-internet, you waited for tomorrow's paper, or you kind of went through the TV, had to wait for the 11 o'clock news to find out for some reason you missed a game or a fight result or something.
Yeah.
You'd have to wait until the end of the newscast and some guy would come on, like
right.
Jerry Gerard or Sal Marciano. And I love those guys.
That's right. Warner Wolf.
Yeah, Warner Wolf will tell you what happened. Now, obviously, we just go on the web and we know things instantaneously. And I think that's a great thing. And, I teach a journalism class at Stony Brook, a sports journalism class. And
great. You've been there for a while, right? You've been there for a minute.
Okay. But I tell them, in some ways, your job is easier than it's ever been because you can find out information like that. Whereas, in the 80s, when I was working at Newsday, if I wanted to find somebody out of state, and we had, in the library, we had phone books of every single state, I'd have to pour through that. And, I'd have to use the reverse phone directory. There was no internet. There was no searching.
That's right.
It was truly like knocking on doors and bringing, calling people and saying, hey, is this so-and-so? And is this the one who's involved with so-and-so? Oh, no, I'm sorry. All right, hang it up. Try the next one.
Right.
On
payphones, too.
Maybe the guy's name is Mr. Jones, and there's 50 of them, or 500 of them.
Lord,
so in that way, obviously, it's a huge, huge benefit, the things that we have are access to now. On the other hand, it's crazy because it puts more pressure on you. I mean, it used to be, I had 2 deadlines every night. I had to hit 7 o'clock and hit 11 o'clock, or sometimes 1 o'clock, and then I go home. Now with the internet, you're always on deadline. If something happens and it's your beat and it happens in the middle of the night, nobody wants to hear that you're sleeping. The internet is waiting. The internet doesn't stop. So, you're constantly on guard for that. Social media has turned everybody into an expert,
right.
and a critic.
Yep.
It used to be if I wrote a story that, pushed a button or hit a nerve, maybe I'd get 2 or 3 letters a week later, handwritten letters from people. Now, immediately 5,000 people tell you're an imbecile on Twitter, right? And if enough of that happens, you can lose a job, right? I mean, social media adds danger. You tweet the wrong thing, you could be out. And I've come pretty close at times. Sometimes you tweet without thinking, or you just, you're pissed off, somebody triggered you, hit a nerve, and you want to just say something right away, and you do it, and you send it out, and then you go, oh my God.
That's right. And even if you delete it, forget it, because someone screenshot.
Yeah, it always lives. It lives forever. So that makes it more difficult. I think it's more difficult for the athletes because, there's direct interaction now. There's no arm's length between athlete and fan. There's no arm's length between journalist and fan. And I'm sure, look, in ways that's right. We should all be held accountable. And I'm fine with being held accountable. But by the same token, there's no barrier,
That's right.
And anybody can just, cancel culture can just strike anybody at any time. So that's difficult. And the other flip side of that also is that it also gives athletes a vehicle to get their message out the way they want to. Without having to be filtered by me or somebody else.
That's right.
If I sit down for a half hour with Alex Rodriguez and he tells me his story, I'm still going to write it through my prism. But now, now you have a vehicle where you can just say what you want to say right out there. There's no fact checking and there's no bias. I mean, let's face it, we all have our biases that come out when we write our stories. So, I mean, it affects things in a lot of different ways, and I can't say it's all good or all bad. I think there's both good and bad in it.
Well, and Wally, speaking of Alex Rodriguez and Jennifer Lopez, they were looking to purchase the New York Mets. That would have
Couldn't
been
be any worse than what's going on now.
Yeah, that's right. I was about to say that could have been a good look for that organization because Alex loves and knows baseball, and J-Lo
Not only
knows
that,
entertainment.
he loved the Mets. He
right.
wanted to be a Met rather than a Yankee.
That's right. That's right. That's right. During free agency, the Mets wouldn't spend the money. Imagine him at Piazza lineup in 02.
They spend the money, and I wrote about this, and I made no friends in the Mets organization. But they put out, a BS story about him making these demands, but he wanted his own merchandising
and his own jet or something.
He wanted like a private plane. He wanted his own suite on the road. Now they all get their own suites on the road. I mean, that's nothing, and Steve Phillips had the famous line, he's a 24-1 guy, which, look, I've had my ups and downs with Alex, and I make fun of him all the time on Twitter because he's such an easy target. But he is. This dude was not a 24-1 guy with the Yankees.
Yeah.
If he was, would he have willingly switched from shortstop to third base so that Derek Jeter could stay the shortstop?
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So that ends that argument right there.
And through all the controversy, he still tried to come back and wanted to,
he played his ass off every step of the way. He did his work.
Even when his skills were eroding.
He wasn't perfect. He made his mistakes. He did the steroid thing twice, lied about it. I mean, he did some of the wrong things. Tried to sue the Players Association, not a smart move. Yeah. Maybe trying to sue the Yankee doctor might not have been a bad move, but it didn't help him in the organization.
Yep.
I mean, the guy's not perfect. We know that. But, I mean, you cannot argue with his work ethic or what he was willing to do for the team. So I think it's been very undercovered, but people should go back to that. They really should. The treatment of Alex Rodriguez by the Mets to cover up the fact they didn't want to pay him was just shameful.
Yeah, absolutely shameful. And that's the organization in general, not wanting to pay and give people their value and be able to really try to build visibility for the team and excitement.
Steve Phillips, who, I've had my things with, and we're civil now. But the truth of the matter is he took the bullet for Wilpon. Without a doubt, it was the Wilpon that said, we're not going to pay this guy, make up a reason why.
Instead of them saying,
as a good soldier, he did. Rather than say, my owners are too cheap, he said, we don't want the guy. He's a bad character guy.
Yeah. Wow. Well, here on So Much to Talk About with the great Wallace Matthews on the show, for sure.
We do have a lot to talk about, don't we?
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And I wanted to ask you about MMA. Dana White. I mean, MMA is continuing to flourish, especially UFC. Then boxing is like, boxing here and MMA up here. Like, can boxing ever have a renaissance from the standpoint of gaining popularity?
Of course. Nabaté, look, you've been around long enough. I've been around longer than you. Boxing always finds somebody. Somebody comes along. When it wasn't Jack Dempsey, then it was Joe Louis. There were 12 years maybe between the two of them. Okay.
Yep.
When it wasn't Joe Louis, it was Rocky Marciano. There were a few years between them. Between Marciano, you had to wait for Muhammad Ali. Then you had to wait for Tyson and Sugar Ray Leonard and Marvin Hagler. Then you waited for De La Hoya. Then you waited for Mayweather. There's always a gap.
Pacquiao too.
I'm biased. I don't like MMA. I think it's absolute garbage. I really do. And I'll tell you why. Because, for a simple reason, because of the tap out. All right? Because you can always if things are not going your way in the fight, you can tap out with no loss of honor, come back, a month from now and everything's cool. You're not considered a quitter or any of that. You tapped out. Meantime, Roberto Duran made a snap decision for 1 second in one fight in a career of glory.
Yep.
Guy fought 120 times, covered himself in glory in just about every one of those fights, except for 1 second of one fight, and that will be in the first line of his obituary. And that's the difference between boxing and MMA. When a boxer climbs those steps and goes in, it is understood by him, by his opponent, and by the crowd that you are going to give it your all until the referee stops you or until the last bell rings. You are not going to quit. Right? Any combat sport in which you can quit, it's not a combat sport. It's really not. It's like, okay, well, it's not working today. It's like taking the pitcher out. You don't have it today, kid. Come on out. Sorry. And, it may be the reason why boxers get hurt, and I hate the fact that
the deaths
and get killed, and I understand that. But that's the attraction of boxing, is that when you go in, one guy is going to leave on his feet and one guy isn't, and that's it. Wow. That's, to me, that's the suspense of a boxing match. If I knew that, this guy's getting beat up, he's going to tap his way out. The hell do I care? I mean, there's nothing at stake.
And I gotta say, Wally, you have instant credibility because you fought in the gloves. You know, you fought in the amateurs, and you aspired to be a pro. Like, you fought. So, talk about that credibility and that,
yeah,
you know,
man,
how it gave you respect in the game.
And I will tell you something. You know, I didn't have a lot of fights. I had a few. I had a couple of dozen. In every fight, no matter how it's going, there always comes a point where the fighter thinks, I'd like to get the hell out of here. You know, because it gets tough, and you know, you get tired, you're hurt, you're discouraged, and you to say, you know what, I'd like to be anywhere but here. But the boxer does not quit. If he does, he's not long for the game.
Of course,
the boxer keeps going. There were many times when I wanted to quit. Right? I fought with a broken jaw. And would not quit because that was not. I'm a fighter. I'm here to fight. You know, and of course, I understand I'm going to get hurt, and I accept that. You know, it's part of my game here. I'm here to win this fight. I'm not going to walk out. And if I quit and walk out, I'm not going to be able to live with myself tomorrow morning.
That's right.
That's a different mentality, obviously. I mean, anybody who will tap out because he might get his arm broken, you know, it's a completely different mentality.
Deep. And those gloves, I see those gloves right there. Tell me about them.
You know what those gloves back there? Let me get them. For you. These are the gloves that were worn by Ray Mercer in the 1988 Olympics when he won his gold medal.
Wow.
And I don't know if you can see this, but they are signed by everybody on the team.
Riddick Bowe.
Kelsey Banks.
Michael Carbajal.
I believe it. Michael Carbajal.
I'm trying to think who else. Henry Tillman, too?
Todd Foster.
Oh, Tillman was 84. I'm sorry, he was 84.
Wallace Ellis.
Roy Jones, of course. Jones.
I was waiting for you to say that. He's on this club.
We ain't forget.
Roy Jones Jr. You all must have forgot.
Wow. Yes.
Yeah, in fact, there were inscriptions in here. I got along really well with this team.
Yeah.
I really did. Kenny Adams.
And you covered that, and we did the film together.
For NBC. Also, Andrew Maynard missed the bus, if you recall. And there was all kinds of horrible things that happened with that team. And I had to do some pretty tough reporting with them. You know, and surprisingly, and to their credit, they never were angry with me for asking tough questions of them. They also knew that if there was an injustice toward the American fighter, I was, you know, or toward any fighter, I was going to do something about it.
Right.
And I did the first interview with Roy Jones after he lost, you know, he was robbed of his gold medal.
Yeah.
You know, he was crying in the ring. It was really horrible. I also did an interview with a referee that was chased out of the ring by the Koreans because they didn't like the decision against the Korean fighter. I mean, that was a rough Olympics, man.
And remember, we did the film 8632, the ESPN 30 for 30 short. That's we were part of that film by our friend Randy Wilkins. Yes.
Yep. But to this day, I mean, Ray Mercer gave me his gloves. I remained friends with Kenny Adams, with Roy Jones, with Ray. So, you know, I felt like, you know, it was a really nice thing that he did to give me those, and I prized them. Unfortunately, the signatures are fading, and I don't know what to do to bring them out again.
You know, oh wow! But you know, maybe put them definitely in a case for sure.
Yeah, it's possible. Yeah.
Oh yeah, do that sooner than later.
That horse may have left the barn, bro.
Oh, wow! But Wally, one more question for you. Wow, it was such an honor to have you on. It's so great to always catch
pleasure,
up with
man.
you.
Really, always good to talk to you.
Oh, absolutely, my pleasure. And I wanted to ask you. You have talk about some articles you have coming up. I know you're doing a lot of freelance writing, and also a book. Your first, which I can't believe.
Because I'm kind of lazy. I have something up on Deadspin.com right now about Daniel Kinahan, who was the alleged Irish mobster who was guiding Tyson Fury's career. You know, a lot of things have been written about him recently because Tyson Fury on his Instagram thanked him for making the Joshua fight, which came as a surprise to my old friends at ESPN. I called them and said, Tyson Fury mentioned this mobster on your air. Do you know who he is? And they basically said, no, we never heard of him, which I figured out. But that story is up on Deadspin.com right now if you want to take a look at it. I also have one coming out. Ring Magazine's having a special Mike Tyson issue. I wrote one of the stories. I wrote about covering Mike from his Catskill days up, till before he fought Berbick, because I covered a lot of his early fights, so I wrote about that. And I am working on a book. I've decided, first of all, I'm a pack rat. I've kept everything. I've got every note I ever took. I have tape recordings of interviews from 35 years ago, and I have a lot of stories that I never wrote about Tyson, about Marvin Hagler, about Ray Leonard, about Foreman, about Holmes, about Cooney, about, you know, and I'm going to write a book of those recollections. In fact, I've already written about 60 pages about Tyson, and people that have read it think it's pretty compelling. So I'm happy with that. I've written a chapter about Muhammad Ali, who I knew in the second half of his life. I never got to cover him as a fighter, but I got to know him from 1985 on. So I would say I knew him the last 30 years of his life, and I wrote a chapter about that. And it's just a way for me to get some of the stories out there that I never really had a chance to write for a newspaper. And I think boxing fans will like it.
There's so much history, and like I said, your credibility, that's what got you close to all of these legends, for sure. You know?
I think they always sensed that I loved boxing and that I respected the fighters. You know, I think that's why.
And you were real.
Yeah, I got along well with the fighters. I think they knew. I mean, some of them pushed back a little bit, but I was always on the Don Kings and Bob Arums of the world for ripping the fighters off.
Yep.
And I think they understood that, and you know, and I just really admired what they did. So I've been lucky to actually, you know, maintain friendships with a lot of those guys through the years. You know, I mean, I always tell Larry Holmes picked up the phone in his hotel room when I was a part-timer at Newsday. I just called him out of the blue, and I wound up getting a good story out of it. And I think that led to me getting my job there.
Yeah.
So whenever I see Larry, I go, if you have a problem with me, man, it's your own fault. Never should have picked up that phone.
That's right.
And he laughs. You know, you had nobody to blame but yourself.
Yep. Well, and real quick, should Mike come back? I mean,
of course
really,
not.
You know,
of course not. I mean, look, I know the heavyweight division is pretty bad right now, but the guy's 53 years old. And remember, Nabaté, he didn't really want to fight when he was 37. Remember that. He took a knee against Kevin McBride. And at the end, they talked, and he said, you know, my heart's not in this anymore. He basically, I think he owed Shelley Finkel a fight on a contract, so he just went through with it. But as soon as the going got tough, he got out. What makes you think 16 years later he's gonna have any more of an appetite for it? Yeah,
and then him and Holyfield, the exhibition. Who wants to see that? Come on.
That would be absolutely pathetic. But Evander still believes he's gonna win the title. You know that.
That's right. He always
he's 60 years old. My God. He looks great though. He looks good.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. Wow. But Wally, my God, my pleasure to have you on the show and once again, and pleasure to catch up with you. And all my regards to Leslie and your kids. Not kids, but adults now. You know?
I still consider them my kids.
Just like my parents think I'm always a child.
Listen, thanks so much for having me, man.
Oh, my pleasure. And thank you all for watching.
Stay safe, will you? Stay healthy.
Oh, yes. Thank you, sir. Thank you. You too. And thank you all for watching so much to talk about. Be safe, be healthy, and stay woke. And Black Lives Matter for sure. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.